Next Gen Console Watch is presented by the Army National Guard. To find out more about how the National Guard is delivering food, building hospitals, and working in our communities during the COVID pandemic, visit nationalguard.com/esports. Welcome back to Next Gen Console Watch 2020, our new show following all the news and rumors on the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. I'm Damon Hatfield. This week I'm joined by Ryan McCaffrey, host of IGN's Xbox podcast, Podcast Unlocked.
Howdy, Damon.
And Lucy O'Brien, IGN's executive editor of features and a panelist on IGN's PlayStation podcast, Podcast Beyond.
Hello, Damon.
Hello there. We begin this week with the fallout, if you will, from the Xbox showcase last week, in particular, the Halo Infinite gameplay showcase. When we spoke about this immediately following the showcase last week, Ryan, you were feeling pretty good about how the whole thing went and about Halo Infinite. But the conversation continued well into the weekend, and it's been actually a little bit controversial. There seem to be two camps, people that were pleased and think it looks like a fun new Halo game, and then another group of people that were a little bit disappointed in the visuals, saying it doesn't really strike them as looking particularly next-gen. And in all honesty, I'd put myself in that second category. Now that you've had a few days to process all this, Ryan, how are you feeling about Halo Infinite today?
Honestly, I feel like the truth is somewhere in between, whether it's deserved or not for Microsoft, and that's kind of where I find myself. I do remain happy about the direction. Like, I liked the gameplay that I saw. I like the direction. I mean, this is a spiritual reboot for Halo. It's picking up the story, but really everything else is kind of a fresh start. They're trying to evoke Halo 1. It seems like they're doing a pretty good job of that based on what we've seen so far. But at the same point, I'll be honest, Damon, when I watched the demo, I didn't think it looked hideous or some of the more extreme reactions we've seen on the internet. But at the same point, I will say I also wasn't wowed. And then when I interviewed 343 after seeing the demo, which I was lucky to get to do that ahead of the showcase. So I'd kind of seen it all in a vacuum without any internet chatter. I asked them, well, okay, this is a unique situation. This is the flagship game for the new console, but it's also being developed for the existing Xbox One. So what next-gen features are you taking advantage of? Like, for instance, ray tracing. And they told me that ray tracing is not there until a free post-launch update. Mm-hmm. And I have to say, like, that did take some of the wind out of my sails as far as my enthusiasm for what I saw. Again, it doesn't change the gameplay, but it is a little bit disappointing that Microsoft themselves has spent 2 years building this game up as their big flagship launch game. It's the first time since Halo 1 that an Xbox console has launched with a mainline Halo game. And it's not taking advantage of every next generation bell and whistle that the Series X has. So it's like, isn't this game supposed to be your big compelling argument for here's what we can do on our new console? So that side of it was disappointing to me. So I think kind of the truth lies somewhere in between of that satisfaction. I think you can be both. You can be satisfied with the gameplay direction and disappointed in what we've seen from it on a technical basis. Now, historically speaking, Damon, one other thing I'd like to point out, just as a reason for optimism, for if you're interested in Halo 1 itself had a notoriously bad E3 showing in 2001, like 5 months before the game came out. And then, of course, it came out and turned into the game that the reason that we're still here even talking about Xbox is because of Halo 1. So there is time, there is reason for optimism. But at the same point, I mean, whether Microsoft likes it or not, this was not the best first proper showing for Halo Infinite.
All right, before we move on, Next Gen Console Watch is presented by the Army National Guard. To celebrate the upcoming console releases, we are giving you a chance to win a Next Gen console by giving away a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox Series X to 2 lucky winners at the end of the month. To enter, all you need to do is visit guardgiveaway.ign.com, where you'll also find official rules for the giveaway. So what are you waiting for? Go to the site and sign up for a Next Gen console. Lucy, what were your impressions of the Halo Infinite showcase last week?
Well, look, I'm going to be honest. I'm a PlayStation person. I grew up with PlayStation. I had an Xbox, but I never really got into Halo. So to me, this just looked like more Halo. I mean, I couldn't really sort of speak to the intricacies of how it might have looked different or how it had improved One thing I will say is that I do agree with Ryan is that it didn't really look particularly next gen. And I think when Microsoft is, the primary messaging that Microsoft is going out with is that we are the most powerful console. I don't quite understand why you wouldn't want to showcase that power across every inch of the screen. So, yeah, it looked like Halo to me, but at the same time, that's not necessarily a good thing.
Hmm. Ryan, you've talked a lot about how with Xbox, it just seems almost. It's sometimes it seems like they just can't win, even when they're doing everything right. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
I mean, yeah, it's I don't want to get too far off into like conspiracy theory territory, but like if we kind of look at things, like Sony has the advantage of having they earned Sony 100% earned their definitive market leader status. The PlayStation 4 was a great piece of hardware, and the first parties, which were, yeah, I mean, if you remember, Damon, I think it's fair to say the first party reputation that Sony has now wasn't really there at the beginning of the PlayStation 4 generation. Like they had good studios. Naughty Dog was there, god tier. Like these guys are going to deliver every single time. But really, aside from that, you had Insomniac doing at the time second party stuff that was good. Ratchet and Clank was always very good. You had Gorilla doing Killzone, which was good, but never. It's really been the PlayStation 4 generation that cemented their reputation for having these just world class first party games. And Microsoft just they just they just can't get back there. And it seems like that when they try to be honest and say, well, okay, we're going to show you real gameplay from a real build of Halo Infinite, and there are flaws and problems with it that, fair or not, that gets picked apart. Whereas Sony, we look at the example of Spider-Man Miles Morales, which is their big day one first party title as far as we know it so far. They just show this really sexy, slick trailer, and then it sort of comes out later that, oh, it's a sort of a standalone expansion that reuses a lot of the same stuff, presumably the same sort of geometry in the city, and how much of it's new, but they they don't really they don't do the interviews and really grant the access and talk about, well, do we even know if Spider-Man is using ray tracing, for instance, to make an apples to apples comparison? No, because Sony can kind of just they can just kind of hang back and just like, we'll just put out a nice slick trailer and that's it. Whereas Microsoft they're trying, like, we want to just show you what we're making and we want to be honest about what we're up to. And it's like it's like they get penalized in a sense, somewhat of their own doing and somewhat not, for that honesty with the community.
Hmm. Lucy, would you agree with the assessment that PlayStation's reputation for having an incredible first-party game lineup really sort of built over this current generation?
Oh, absolutely. I think that, PlayStation exclusives have become synonymous with quality. And I think when an exclusive is on the horizon, people expect it to be, a 9 out of 10, a 10 out of 10 kind of game, because that is what we're used to. That is what Sony has come to deliver. So yes, absolutely. And I do think Ryan is correct in that Sony did rest on its laurels a little bit in that showcase. We could have seen a lot more of what the PlayStation 5 can actually do. We really didn't see much aside from the Ratchet and Clank trailer, I thought. Everything else was very kind of on the surface, blink and you miss it. Smoke and mirrors a little bit. But as Ryan said, Sony can afford to do that because they've got the enormous market share. People are so hyped for this console. People are so hyped for a new Spider-Man game. They can afford to sit on their laurels a little bit. But there's still a lot more to prove from Sony when it comes to showing off how PlayStation 5 is exactly next gen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So both of these camps, both PlayStation and Microsoft, have bungled a console launch over the past two generations. In the 360 PS3 generation, it was Sony bungling the launch of the PS3, although they were eventually able to catch up to 360. And then this generation, Xbox bungled the launch of the Xbox One, and they weren't ever able to catch up to PS4, at least in terms of sales. As we're in another next-gen launch year, what's the possibility that either of these could make such a colossal bungle of their launch again? Ryan, let's start with you.
I don't see either one of them screwing it up that badly, which is good. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't want them to. I want them both to do well. And yeah, I mean, Microsoft, the mistake one with the Xbox One was, well, probably bundling it with Connect and thus causing the price to be $100 more. They're not going to do that. My money is on the Series X, actually undercutting the PlayStation 5 on price. Maybe not by a lot, but I think I'm very confident that it's going to do that, which will bode well for them. And they do have a very powerful console, the 12 teraflop machine, which as once the machines are out and we start to see what the same games, what the third parties look like on each one and how they run, I think that's when Microsoft will start to see some of the benefits and the good word of mouth in the community there. They've already avoided a lot of the same messaging mistakes. They're not making the same hardware mistakes. I don't think they're going to make the same pricing mistakes. And as for Sony, I think really the only thing that could even trip them up right now is if they were to pull a $599 repeat scenario, which I know a lot of numbers have been thrown around, rumored like this Amazon leak or whatever about how much the PlayStation 5 costs, and it sort of remains to be seen. But barring like a 3DO kind of situation, and yeah, I'm going into the Wayback Machine for that one,
Yeah.
Damon. But yeah, barring a like disastrously high price, I don't see Sony botching this either.
Yeah, I mean, I was at the very pointy end of the PlayStation 3 bungle, in that I was in the Southern Hemisphere and I was paying $999 for the 60 gig version, and I was buying it so much later, than the the 360 came out, So
Yeah. Yeah.
it was awful, and I can't fathom Sony having gone through that and suffering the repercussions at making the same mistake again. I don't think the PlayStation 5 will be 599. I can't fathom a world in which it'll be 599, even though those numbers, as Ryan mentioned, have been thrown around. I think we're going to see the price for both the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5 be very, very similar, especially because there are going to be two editions. And yeah, I think that the discrepancy is going to be quite small. I don't think we're going to see anything like we did back in the 360 PS3 era.
Okay, dear viewers, we have a new poll for you this week. Do you participate in the next gen console war, which is absolutely firing up right now? Let us know. Vote at IGN.com. Let us know if you're a Sony soldier, if you're in the Xbox trenches, or you just stick with your PC. Make sure to vote, and we'll share the results with you next week. Just like we have the results of last week's poll for you now, we asked which announcement from the Xbox Games Showcase delighted you the most. And the winner with 30% of the vote was Fable, the new Fable game. Not too surprising, Ryan, in terms of what was shown off last week. Fable was the obvious choice, right?
Yeah, although I will say I thought Avowed would have done better. Maybe it's just because it's a completely new thing, but given it's Obsidian, and it's definitely got some Skyrim kind of Elder Scrolls type vibes. I thought that might fare a little better. I suspect as time goes on and we see more of that, it will. But yeah, it actually warmed my heart to see that there is still that love in the IGN community for Fable, because I certainly still adore that series, and I'm so optimistic about it. I could not be more confident in Playground Games, because they have they've not only never made a bad game, they actually get better every time. They're making 9.5, 10 out of 10 level games now with Forza Horizon. Each one's been better than the last. So this second team that they've spun up, I have full confidence that they're going to knock Fable out of the park.
Lucy, I know you're a PlayStation person, but is there also room in your heart for Fable?
Oh, Fable, yeah. I mean, again, I always had both consoles as soon as both consoles were a thing. And Fable was definitely such a great reveal for me. It didn't really matter that you didn't see much, because it really hit the tone so perfectly. And I think that's all they needed to do. I don't even care how far along that game is. The fact that Fable is still a thing just makes me so happy.
Mhm. Yeah, everyone's excited about that one. That will do it for this edition of Next Gen Console Watch 2020. Thank you to both Ryan and Lucy. We'll be back next Friday at 6 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Eastern with more PS5 and Xbox Series X news. We'll see you then.